We finally know the final edition of the college football playoff rankings, but do the Aggies have the hardest path of any other team?
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. I'm your host, Matt Galatzan. Welcome to Locked On Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network. I'm joined today by Zach Dimmitt. And Zach, we finally have the final edition of the college football playoff rankings, 1 through 12. The bracket is set. The field is set. And it's interesting. They made a few choices, we shall say, in their final, in their final rankings. I hate saying final over and over again, but that's what they are. They're final. This is what we're working with. And Texas A&M might have the toughest path of any other team in the country, in the field at least. They start off with Miami, which we're going to talk about here in the third segment. But let's just break down the college football playoff field as it stands right now and how we feel about it. The Aggies came in at number 7. They didn't move up, didn't move down after being idle on SEC championship weekend. But they are involved in the big change that happened on Sunday. The committee flipped Notre Dame and Miami thanks to that head-to-head. And I guess thanks to Texas Tech for just blowing the doors off of BYU for the second straight time. And now Texas A&M has quite the interesting path. Before we get into it, though, Zach, what are your opinions of the field? Is there anything that you would have changed? Any seeds that you would have flipped? Do you think the Aggies came in the right spot? Because I, for one, tend to believe that they're about where they should be given everything else that happened.
Yeah, I have a few opinions. I think the committee did a few things right. I think they did a few things wrong. For starters, I don't see how Georgia shouldn't have been the 2 seed. I know you don't want to punish teams for losing their conference title game, but Georgia won the SEC in very convincing fashion. I don't see how they don't get the 2 seed. That's one thing. I do agree that Notre Dame should have been out in favor of Miami. Really glad that the committee made the right decision there. I'm sorry, but you play your schedule for a reason. I don't care how early the game was. Miami beat them. And I know it was a 3-point game, but Miami beat Notre Dame. They deserve to be in. And it benefits A&M because I think Notre Dame going to College Station would have been really tough, but then Notre Dame would have been, pretty motivated. I feel like going into that game, it had been a tougher matchup for A&M, in my opinion, than Miami will be. Though, as we'll get to later in the segment, Miami's still going to be very, very tough as well. But I think A&M seeding is also something that couldn't be debated. I actually wrote about that over on Texas A&M Aggies on SI. If you guys want to go check that out, I just don't see how. Yes, I understand that they dropped because of the Texas loss, and they were at 7, before the bracket. But when you compare the resumes with Ole Miss and Oregon, I don't see how A&M doesn't have an argument to move up to, maybe to 5. That may be a stretch. I've seen some people in the comments saying, "Oh, too much of a stretch." I'm sorry, but that's just how I feel because Oregon's resume is pretty suspect. They haven't played a lot of tough teams. The toughest team they played was Indiana, and they lost that game at home. There's an argument to be made that A&M should have been moved up because if A&M's hosting James Madison and then facing Texas Tech, you can almost book the Aggies trip to the semifinals. But instead, it's a lot tougher, and I think it's the toughest path by far when you look at this bracket. You got to face a really talented Miami team that can be a little bit inconsistent at times, but still at their ceiling, at their peak is very, very good. This is the Notre Dame. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. We'll get into how tough the path is here in a minute, Zach. But I want to sort of argue your point with Ole Miss a little bit, just to play a little bit of devil's advocate, so we can kind of maybe stoke some conversation in the comments. I mean, you guys let us know. Do you think that Texas A&M should be ranked ahead of Ole Miss and Oregon? I think they should be ranked ahead of Oregon because Oregon doesn't really have the quality win on its resume that you would need. That can compete with Texas A&M's win over Notre Dame or Ole Miss's win over Oklahoma, for example. I mean, they beat Penn State, who ended up being a really bad football team. They beat Iowa, who's on the outside of the top 20 of the playoff rankings. If any of those three teams should have dropped, in my opinion, it is probably Oregon. But there does seem to be a little Big Ten bias in this poll. I don't think that there's any way that you can justify Ohio State being ranked ahead of Georgia, considering both teams have one loss. Georgia has many more quality wins on their resume than the Buckeyes do. And they blew the doors off of Alabama, which was their only loss of the season previously. So they avenged their only loss of the season previously. That doesn't make too much sense to me. In terms of Ole Miss, I think you're kind of, you're kind of ticky-tacky if you think you should put Texas A&M ahead of Ole Miss or vice
Splitting
versa.
hairs.
Splitting hairs is a good way to put it. Like, I think you could do it either way. A&M's got the win over Notre Dame at Notre Dame. Ole Miss has the win over Oklahoma at Oklahoma. Ole Miss has the win over Tulane, who they're playing in the first round already, who's a playoff team.
Right.
And their only loss of the season is to the Georgia Bulldogs, who have one loss. And Texas A&M has a worse loss technically than Ole Miss does by losing to Texas, and it happened later in the year. So you're really splitting hairs. But it's a great conversation piece for sure. So everybody in the comments, let us know what you think about that. I will tell you this, Zach. This is my biggest gripe with the whole thing. They got Miami right. They got Texas right. Texas shouldn't have been in it. Georgia and Ohio State's fine, whatever. It shouldn't be that way, but it is what it is. It doesn't really bother me too much. They have painted themselves into a corner with the language in the rules that says the top 5 highest ranked conference champions, because now we have James Madison in the field when you should have put in Alabama, not Alabama. You should have put in BYU. You should have put in Vanderbilt. You should have put in Texas. Somebody other than James Madison. It should be the 12 best teams, and I'm fine with group of 5, participation, but I think they have to earn it. And I don't think that James Madison is a good representation of what the college football playoff should be.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think, I know Duke had 5 losses, but Duke would be able to give Oregon a better fight than James Madison will, in my opinion. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe James Madison comes out really motivated and puts up a decent fight. Still is going to lose no matter what. But yeah, I agree with you there. You also have to look at it as it's the ACC's fault for being as crazy as it was this year, that you allowed the scenario to happen where the ACC champion doesn't get in. And so that was kind of the ACC's fault. It's a little bit of Miami's fault. So hopefully this doesn't happen again. But yeah, I've seen some people bring up the conversation that, if you're a conference champion in one of the 4 highest conference champions, that you need to be ranked in a certain place in the final CFP rankings to actually get into the bracket. Like I think Tulane was 20, James Madison was like 24. And so, you're going to have one group of 5 team in there, but James Madison at 24, that seems a little bit too low into the rankings to be able to get that automatic bid. I don't know. I hope that they figure that out, because some really deserving teams got left out. Personally, I don't think BYU should have been in, but Notre Dame, they definitely deserve to be the first team out. And they're definitely a college football playoff team, but in the scenario that we were given, Miami deserved it over them. But man, Vanderbilt, Texas, Notre Dame, those 3 teams, it would have been really interesting to see those teams in the playoff, considering how they played. But at the end of the day, you can't have too many gripes about it. I do think A&M seeding is a little bit off, because now they have a really tough path, as we're going to get to in a second.
Yeah, I didn't want to say Notre Dame deserved to be in because of the way their AD has acted. In terms of the way they played on the field, they probably deserve to be in there over James Madison. But given the way their AD has reacted to being left out, stop being whiny babies, join a conference. If you had joined the ACC, you'd be in the playoff. If you had joined the Mountain West or the MAC, you're still Notre Dame. You still have 2 losses. You'd still be in the playoff. So quit your bitching. and join a conference. But yeah, it is what it is. BYU probably shouldn't be in there. They looked atrocious against Texas Tech.
No.
They look slow. They look boring. Big 12 football is boring. Let's be honest. But let's get into it, Zach. When we come back from our break, we are going to tell you exactly why we think Texas A&M has the hardest path of any team in the playoff field, bar none. So stick with us after this break, and we'll be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track the price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. You pull up the app, and the layout makes it so simple to scroll through matchups and compare seat views. You can pick a game, tap a section, and you have your tickets locked within minutes. No confusion, no hunting for fine print. So take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets in every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. This is going to be tough, Zach. This is going to be real tough. Obviously, the Aggies are happy they got in. First time in as a program. Big deal. You get a home playoff game. Big deal. But, and I'm going to bring the graphic back up here in a second, but you start off with Miami, who a lot of people thought was the best team in the country for a good portion of the season before they dropped those couple of games, in the second half of their schedule. They're really big. They're really fast. They're really talented. They have a really good quarterback in Carson Beck. That's going to be tough, regardless of the fact that it's at Kyle Field. I mean, you also have 11 a.m. at Kyle Field, which is BS. Like, make it a night game. It's a college football playoff game. Make it a night game. I don't care if you have to compete with the NFL. That's not fair to the Aggies. That's not fair to the fans, because they earned a home playoff game at night, and they didn't get it. But you move on from Miami, hoping you win that game, which I think they'll have a pretty good shot to do. And we'll preview it as we get closer to the game and throughout the week. But if you beat Miami, you got to go on to Ohio State, who's got about 37 NFL starters on that team. I mean, they have NFL talent all over the board. Quarterback, best wide receiver in the country, really good running backs, stars at every level of the defense. Caleb Downs, maybe the best college football player in America. Then if you beat them, you have to play the winner of Ole Miss and Georgia, which I believe we think will be Georgia, considering they already beat them once this year, and Georgia's playing the best football right now. Hey, you never know. Justin Summerall could get it done. Odds are, though, if you're going to make it to a national championship, you have to go through Miami, you have to go through Ohio State, and then you have to go through Georgia, whereas any of these other teams on the other side of the bracket, they don't have anything near that path. And I personally think A&M is good enough to get through this gauntlet, but it's going to be real tough.
Yeah, when you look at this bracket, there's no doubt who has the toughest path. And even if you had flip-flopped Ohio State and Georgia, it still would have been incredibly tough. The only thing that I think makes this maybe a little bit easier on the Aggies is that you essentially can get 2 back-to-back home games. No, it's not Kyle Field, but you'd head to Arlington, which, I don't have my maps pulled up, but that's probably like, a 3-hour drive from College Station or so. And
close enough.
There's gonna be a lot of Ohio State fans there if A&M makes it, but you're gonna see the Aggie faithful come out really strong for that game. That's going to be quite a scene if A&M's able to match up with Ohio State. So you're at AT&T Stadium in Arlington. You essentially get back-to-back home games. So if you look at it that way, it's a little bit favorable, or it's a little bit less difficult, I should say. But man, the second toughest path is maybe like Alabama, And even then, I don't even think that's as tough because, Indiana's very deserving of the 1 seed, but Oklahoma, very, very up and down team. And then you can maybe have a chance to play Texas Tech in the semis if you're Alabama. So that's the second toughest path. But even then, it's a big gap between them and A&M's path. So, and then you can't overlook the Miami game. Obviously, I'm talking about advancing Ohio State, but Miami's going to be highly motivated coming into this game. A lot of people were doubting them, thinking they should have been left out. And Miami, is going to have something to prove because, the Hurricanes have shown a pretty high ceiling this year, but also they've shown, a decently low floor at times. I mean, I know their 2 losses were to, not necessarily ACC bottom feeders. SMU and Louisville were decent teams. But again, that's 2 unranked losses that Miami had this year. And so they've shown what they're capable of when they're not at their best, where a team like Georgia, even if they're not at their best, they're still, going to be one of the best teams in the country. So, yeah, I think Miami's, has tons of talent, and we'll get to that in a second. But, Ohio State's going to be motivated. Miami's going to be motivated. And if you're able to get past both of those teams, you're going to face Georgia, which is really, looking like one of the best teams in the country, aside from Indiana at this point. So, man. But what a run it would be if A&M's able to pull all that off, make it to Miami, which is where the national championship is, and, potentially face Tech, Indiana, and one of those teams. So it's going to be quite a journey.
Yeah, you know what this reminds me of a little bit, and this is kind of a reference for NBA fans. This kind of reminds me of the path that the Dallas Mavericks had to take in 2011.
Yeah.
When they had the Portland Trail Blazers in round 1, who are a really good team with Brandon Roy and LaMarcus Aldridge. And then they went on to the second round, and they faced the defending champion Lakers and Kobe and Powell. Yep. And then they went on to that. They went on to the Western Conference Finals, and they had to face KD, Russ, and James Harden in the Western Conference Finals. Oh, and then they got LeBron, D-Wade, and Chris Bosh in the finals. So if the Aggies are going to pull it off, it could be one of the greatest runs we've seen by a college football team in the postseason. I mean, obviously, this is just the second year of the college football playoff, but it would be the most deserving path you could possibly imagine for Texas A&M to win a national championship. So that could be something special. We'll see if they can get it done. We'll preview it a lot over the coming weeks. But Zach, let's take our next break. We're going to do a little bit of a quicker segment here so we can get on to taking an early look at Miami, who they are, what they're about, and why this is going to be such a tough matchup for Texas A&M. So stick with us after this break, and we'll be right back. The holidays come with 2 big goals: feeding the people well and finding gifts they'll actually love. And when you want both handled in one move, Omaha Steaks is the way to go. From hosting to gifting, they deliver the world's best steak experience right to your door. Because during their Sizzle All the Way sale, you can stock up and save in a huge way. 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. And it even gets better. Locked On College listeners get an extra $35 off with code COLLEGE at checkout. I love how easy it is to gift. It shows up frozen, packed beautifully, and ready to cook. And it's holiday magic made easy. Order by 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and it ships the same day. So save big on gourmet gifts and more holiday favorites with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their code during their Sizzle All the Way sale. And for an extra $35 off, use promo code COLLEGE at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. That's omahasteaks.com, code COLLEGE. Thank you for making Locked On Aggies your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club and get Locked On Aggies with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedonaggies.supercast.com or click the link in the show notes for more. If you're a true diehard Locked On Aggies fan, the Everydayer All Access tier is built for you. You'll get one-on-one text access with me, all access episodes, an exclusive newsletter, and a 15% discount to the Locked On merch store. Head to lockedonaggies.supercast.com to join the Everydayer Club and unlock all access. You can also find the link in the show notes. All right, Zachary. Miami's a really, really good football team. At one point, they were in the conversation for the number one team in the country. And then they kind of hit a skid early on. I believe it was in November. They got off to that really hot start. They beat Notre Dame. They beat South Florida, who had beaten Florida. They crushed Florida. They beat Florida State. And then they lost to Louisville in a 24-21 heartbreaker when they were ranked number 2 in the country. Kind of gave that football game away, rebounded their next game out, beat Stanford 42-7, and then they gave another one away to SMU in a game that they should have won. And then they cruised through the rest of their schedule. They crushed Syracuse, NC State, Virginia Tech, and number 22 Pitt to end the season. Regardless of how they fared during that stretch of the season where they struggled, however, there is a ton of NFL talent on this team. Just going through their stats real quick as a unit, they rank second in the ACC in scoring offense, averaging 34.1 points per game. They are fourth in total offense, averaging 425.8 yards per game. They're seventh in rushing, 150 yards per game. They're fourth in passing, 275.8 yards per game. And then defensively, that's kind of where they make their hay. They've only given up 13.8 points per game this season. That's first in the ACC. Total defense, they're also first in the ACC, 277.8 yards per game. They have the best rush defense in the ACC, giving up just 86.8 yards per game. And the number 3 pass defense, just 190.9 yards per game. And we'll go through some players to watch here in a second, Zach, but this is a really, really good football team that I know that they played in the ACC, and it wasn't the toughest schedule in the world. But they did some good things in non-conference, and they beat Notre Dame, who a lot of people thought should have been in the playoff. So this is going to be a force to be reckoned with come first, round one.
Yeah, I mean, you can have your gripes about their resume if you want, but there's no doubt that this team is, very talented. Playing in the ACC, they're obviously the best in that conference. Let's be real. I don't care about the losses to Louisville and SMU. I mean, SMU is a pretty solid team, so it's a loss. It is what it is. But like I said previously, when they're clicking and they're reaching their ceiling, they got a high ceiling, and it's it's pretty impressive what they can do. I mean, there's a reason they were number 2 at one point in the AP poll this year. So, 2 losses in 3 games is definitely going to knock you down from that. But it's clear what this team is capable of, and I know Mike Elko talked about it yesterday. This team is ultra talented. They're not going to be surprising A&M or anything like that, and that's a good thing because let's be real. No matter what team is going to be coming to Kyle Field, they weren't going to be taking A&M by surprise, and certainly Miami won't be either. But yeah, I think you got an experienced quarterback like Carson Beck. Talented guys all across the roster, NFL guys. A&M's going to have their hands full, but at the same time, Miami's going to have its hands full, and we'll really see, what this Miami team can do in the toughest environment it's going to play in all season. Because I think, what was it, the first 5 games of the year for Miami were all in the state of Florida, and I think maybe the first 6 games were all in the state of Florida. If I'm looking at their schedule correctly, that's pretty crazy to think. So they haven't really been tested when it comes to traveling. I think the very end of the year, they went to Virginia Tech, they went to Pitt, won those games convincingly, but this is by far going to be their toughest test. So it's going to be tough on both sides.
Yeah. They didn't leave the state of Florida until November.
Oh, wow.
That's crazy. Their first 7 games were actually all in the state of Florida. They had their first 4 games at home, and then they went to Florida State, and then they had Louisville and Stanford at home. So,
I see that.
That they did not travel a whole lot until the end of the year, but once they got that SMU game out of their system, and they had those 2 games at the end of the year on the road, they fared pretty well. Let's go through a couple players real quick just to keep an eye on, Zach, and we'll get into more of this stuff later as we talked about. But a couple players offensively for Miami. Carson Beck, guy that a lot of people thought was going to be the Heisman Trophy winner last year before the season started, had a bit of a rough year at Georgia, ended up transferring to Miami. He started off really well, was in the conversation again, then kind of got a little bit inconsistent, but he's still a very, very talented player. And one of the best pure passers of the football that there is in the country. He's thrown for 3,072 yards, 25 touchdowns, 10 picks, completed 74.7% of his passes. Lead running back Mark Fletcher Jr., 141 carries for 685 yards and 10 scores. This is a 6'2", 225-pound hammer that Miami has in the backfield. They also have, two other running backs who get significant carries: Chamar Brown and Gerard Pringle Jr. Pringle Jr. is averaging 6.2 yards per carry. He's got 4 touchdowns. Chamar Brown has 5 touchdowns this year, averaging just under 4 yards a carry. And then at receiver, Malachi Toney is the guy to know. 84 catches, leads the team, 970 yards, 7 scores. And then CJ Daniels also has 7 touchdowns. A lot of playmakers on this offense.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Malachi Toney. This guy is absolutely electric. I mean, I believe they said it on the selection show when they were talking about Miami, how Toney doesn't have a single drop this year, which is pretty impressive considering some of his catches have been like, one-handed snags. So this guy is, he's a true freshman, by the way. So the fact that he hasn't been making those mental mistakes, he's been putting up the stats to back it up. This guy's going to be really, really dangerous, to watch against A&M for sure. You don't necessarily want to pigeonhole yourself and say, okay, Will Lee, you guard this guy the whole game. It's going to take a whole team effort. And so, the thing that sticks out to me about him, though, you got to be watching out for some of these trick plays that Miami maybe has deep in the playbook for this game. A lot of these teams save some of these plays for the most important points of the season. And Malachi Toney, he's been involved in some of those. He's 4 of 6 passing this year for 82 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean,
Yep.
For your receiver to be doing that, that's pretty impressive. And then on top of that, 17 carries, 89 yards, and a touchdown. So they get him the ball in a lot of different ways. And his longest pass was 44 yards. I mean, this guy can be their backup quarterback, I guess. But he's very, very electric. Also a punt returner. It's going to be hard to imagine Miami not getting him the ball in some way. Against A&M. If A&M's able to lock it down through the air, Miami may find different ways to get him the ball. So it's going to be really exciting. And of course, there's a lot of days to leading up to the game. So we'll get into more of that, as the days go on. But yeah, I'm really excited to watch him. And I'm really also excited to see how A&M, could potentially shut him down, because he's by far Miami's best playmaker.
Here's another thing about Malachi Toney. True freshman.
Yeah,
he does all that for them. Absolutely crazy. One of the best freshmen in the country. Just a quick look at the defensive side of the ball. Mohamed Toure leads the team in tackles for Miami, 54 total tackles. He also has a sack to his name. Jacoby Thomas has 4 interceptions. That is tied for the lead on the team with Bryce Fitzgerald, 2 really good defensive backs there. And Thomas is also second on the team in tackles with 48. And then personally, I think that the 2 biggest names you need to know out of all of these players defensively for Miami, Akeem Mesidor has 7 sacks. He leads the team. He has 4 forced fumbles, absolute playmaker on that interior of the defensive line. 6'3", 280 pounds. He's a senior out of Canada, but perhaps the number 1 player on this team, period. And maybe the number 1 player that's going to go in this NFL draft, that's not a quarterback, Reuben Bain Jr. He is an absolute monster on that defensive line. He's got 4.5 sacks. He's got a pick. He's got a pass deflection. He's got a forced fumble. He's got 37 total tackles. But he is the biggest disruptor on this football team. He is definitely their number 1 NFL draft prospect. And this Aggies offensive line is going to have a really tough day ahead of them if they cannot slow down Reuben Bain.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, probably the best non-quarterback that's going to be in this draft. It's still kind of unsure who's going to be number 1 overall. Maybe Caleb Downs. But Reuben Bain definitely in that top 5 for sure. Very talented defensive class in the draft this year. But yeah, he had an interception against Notre Dame. Didn't have an interception the rest of the season, but he already brought his best in Miami's biggest game of the season. And so you never know what can happen against A&M. The sack numbers, 4.5 sacks. You may think, look at the sack numbers and think, he's not that good, overrated. Don't pay attention to sack numbers too much, especially when it comes to a guy that's on the defensive line. You can disrupt the game in a lot of different ways than by posting sack numbers. So, it's going to be really interesting to watch because A&M's offensive line is very elite, but Miami's defensive line elite as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what gives in that area.
Absolutely. And like I said, we'll get into more of what to watch with Miami tomorrow. In fact, tomorrow is going to be our big Miami preview show. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Aggies. Make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On Aggies so you get all the latest episodes. You can find us at Locked On Aggies on X. And listen, did Locked On Aggies make your Spotify Wrapped? Prove it on social media to secure a free month of our brand new Everydayer Club. Just tag our national Locked On Podcast Network account on any social platform, and we'll drop you a code. Be one of the first to join the Everydayer Club and get your favorite show ad-free and exclusive access to the members-only Discord channel. For those of you on video, we send you the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure you make your second listen Locked On College Football. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, follow me on X at Matt Galatzan, follow Zach on X at Zach Dimmitt 7. Check out Texas A&M Aggies on SI for the latest Texas A&M news and notes, and we'll see you next time.